absolutely expect the fallout. If you can expect the fallout, you're already starting to prime your nervous system. Then it's about the stories that you tell yourself. So the nervous system, once you start thinking, oh my God, this thing could happen, is going to give you all the reasons why this is the worst thing in the world. Then I want to invite you to sit down and to go through all of the fears that you have and to contemplate. If this did happen, what would I do? If I was cancelled on the internet, yes, you feel bad, but what would I actually do? What would my response be? So you're gathering evidence. Then you're going to start to tell a different story. You're going to start to embody the woman who is brave, is liberated. How would she move through this? How would she walk through life? What decisions would she make? How would she respond? You play in that field of what if, of potential, and again, you're priming your nervous system to be able to handle it. And then you take these micro steps in the direction of, what it is that you're desiring.
Hello and welcome to the Liberated Woman Podcast, where my guests and I empower ambitious, mission-driven women like you to break free from toxic productivity and embrace a joyful, satisfying life. I'm your host, Tamu Thomas, author of Women Who Work Too Much, leadership coach and keynote speaker. In each episode, we explore personal and professional growth, featuring insightful conversations with inspiring guests, as well as episodes where I explore topics and answer your questions to support your growth and transformation. If you enjoy the show, please do like, subscribe, comment, rate, review, and share. The more listeners I reach, the more impactful guests I can attract to support your journey. Okay, let's begin. Hello, you wonderful humans. Welcome back to another episode of the Liberated Woman Podcast with me and my exquisite guest, Diahann Holder. I am delighted to have Diahann on this show. She is a leadership mentor. She does a lot of work in the human design space. And one of the things I admire, that's the word, one of the things I admire about Diahann is the way she radically owns herself. And that's why I invited her on to the podcast. Diahann, I experience you as somebody who is not making any bones or playing around with her power and her ambition. And that, for me, makes you magnetic, enchanting even, especially in a world where most women, are conditioned to play down who they are, to play down how powerful they are, to play down what they desire, even to play down what they need. And I appreciate and respect the fact that you are up here with your heretic ways saying, that's fine for you lot, but round here, we sit in the seat of our power and we operate from that place. So I'm really excited for this conversation to unfold. And there are so many places we can go. But before I go to all of those places, I would like to warmly welcome you. And for my listeners that haven't had the opportunity to connect with you in your work, please could you tell us a bit about yourself, what you do and why you do it?
Well, first and foremost, thank you for that wonderful introduction. It's a real pleasure and an honour. And I similarly see you in that light as well. So it is, it's fabulous. It's wonderful to be here. I am Diahann Holder and I am a life design and leadership coach. One of the things that I love to do, my passion, is to help women in particular, but not exclusively, to understand at the deepest level who they are, to feel who they are, to know what their gifts are, to know what their kind of unique strengths, to connect really deeply with their purpose, their mission, and to live it, to live the experience of prosperity from a 360-degree perspective, like the true experience of prosperity, which is intrinsic in their relationships, in the lifestyle that they choose to have, and in their career.
And tell us a bit about you. What led you to this mission, to this calling?
I've always been fascinated by human potential, and this stemmed right back to my first degree in theatre, drama and theatre, and understanding, the personalities of the characters and what drove them. And then I actually had an experience at 20 of being diagnosed with a very debilitating autoimmune condition. And that catalyzed a huge kind of personal development exploration where I discovered that, the reason, for me at least, in my understanding, that I got this gift, I say, of an illness was because I was living so out of alignment with who I truly was. I'd adopted an identity that wasn't my own. I wasn't living my truth. I was speaking my truth, really. And my body turned on itself. So many women have this experience. I mean, disproportionately experience autoimmune conditions. And when you look at the biology happening, is the cells are turning on themselves, right? The body's turning on itself. And that was a huge wake-up call for me. I remember being sat in a hospital, wired up to machines. Up until that point, I thought I was living this very kind of vivacious, free life. And then there was this moment of being sat there on this hospital ward, wired up to machines. The people sat opposite me were 3 times my age and on their way out. And I just remember thinking, hell no. Like this is not the way, this is not the path. And, short of the wires out of my body and running down the street, I decided in that moment that I was going to figure out what the hell was going on, because up until that point, the narrative was that this condition was chronic. And so that took me on a journey of exploration in my 20s around the world, studying psychology, studying Eastern mysticism, to truly understand who I was, what I was here for, and how I could heal myself. So that's really what catalyzed this massive personal development movement for myself, and then inspired me to support other people fully incarnating into their own being too.
Diahann, I want to know about your childhood. I want to know about what contributed to you at 20 saying, okay, medical profession, thank you so much for this intel. I am now going to embark on my own journey of personal development and healing myself. And the reason I ask that is because there are many of us who would I'm thinking about me at 20. If I had been in that position, I would have thought, okay, well, these are medical professionals. This is a hospital. They know what I'm talking about. So I need to follow that path. I would not at that stage have thought to myself, actually, this is in my hands. I have the power to be able to effectively live into my destiny, not the one that you're saying is for me. What is it about you that heard that and thought, okay, cool. Thank you so much for that. I am the sovereign. I'm going to do what I need to do.
I love that question. And I love it because actually, it's a reminder that within me, within us all intrinsically, I believe, and it manifests itself at different stages in our life. For me, this was a huge catalyst. Intrinsically, we have something inside that wants to fight for our life, that wants to express itself, that wants to take control and ownership. And yes, it's something that many of us have to cultivate over time, but I believe it's intrinsic. Additionally, I had parents, and this is really interesting because, as you probably experienced as well, there were lots of messages going on in our upbringing. On the one hand, I had parents who were like, stand up for what you believe in, fight for what you believe in, stand up for yourself, don't be afraid to shine. And then the other message was like, do all those things, but you got to listen to us. You got to listen to us, and we have expectations and standards as to how we believe you should be operating, right? So these two essentially conflicting messages in many ways. So I think that part of me that was encouraged to be sovereign was the part of me that said at 20, this is not going to happen like this. But interestingly, I also believe that the reason why the illness manifested in the way that it did was because I was trying to live out a life that wasn't mine. I was trying to people please. I was trying to fight against, a narrative and a stereotype of Black people, Black women, that I clearly didn't agree with. And so my whole life at that point growing up was about proving myself. It was about not being, but being the best. So academically, I was the best, and I pushed myself to the point where this illness had to manifest to slow me down, to stop me in my tracks, to say, Diahann, this is not the way to go about it.
I love that so much, and I'm wondering. Definitely, there was a huge part of me that people pleased as a coping strategy, because I've always felt and been different, but only in relatively recent years felt safe enough to be like, do you know what? This is me. That's it. I'm wasting too much energy being other. And I also wonder if it's generational, because I'm Gen X, I'm not a millennial. And sometimes I feel like I'm looking at millennials over the fence and Gen Z. Well, I'm a mother of a quintessential Gen Z. And I do wonder if some of that is that we were brought up with different narratives, because it was very much my narrative and the girls I grew up around, particularly Black girls and brown girls. It was very much a narrative about assimilation. We stand out by getting the good grades, but we don't show off about the good grades because we don't want people to think we're too big for our boots. It was very much about not standing out. It was very much about fitting in. We now know that doesn't create any safety whatsoever. And in fact, it creates deep mistrust within you because you're abandoning yourself and telling yourself untruths all the time to be able to cope. So my awakening came at 38 when my body was like, you can't stuff it down anymore. There's no more room. You are like a pressure cooker. And that whistle is so loud now, you can't drown it out. You can't drown it out with a course. You can't drown it out with doing things for people. You can't drown it out by joining another circuit training, 6 a.m. boot camp. You can't drown this out anymore. And I tried, and then the anxiety and panic attacks came, and I thought I was going to die. And it was like, okay, something needs to change now. So I think this is going to sound so self-helpy, but I'm so grateful for you that this thing happened for you at 20 as opposed to 38. And I also acknowledge for many women, maybe men too, I don't know. My work is all centered around women, that 38 also seems to be a pivotal age in terms of your whole biology saying we're not dicking around anymore. We will break you down so that you can have this breakthrough. Okay? So with all of that in mind, what does liberation mean for you personally, and how has it evolved from 20 to now?
You know what? Liberation for me is truly a feeling. It's a state of being more than it is an external experience. And so I'm less interested in, although it's important, I'm less interested in extrinsic liberation, meaning, freedom based on the standards of, let's say, an oppressor. And I'm much more interested in the experience you're having, I'm having internally, despite my circumstances, despite what's happening on the outside. And I understand that this is quite a controversial perspective to have, particularly where, what's happening in the collective is so acute in terms of suffering.
Mm-hmm.
And I think of people like Nelson Mandela, who also spoke to this. He said, I had to cultivate this internal sense of freedom inside of me, despite my external circumstances. Mm-hmm. And for me, this really encapsulates is the core of my work, the core of what I'm here to do is to help you feel that experience of liberation, to then be able to influence and inspire what happens externally. It really does begin on the inside, as you know. And so personally for me, liberation is a feeling of being able, the potential to speak truth to power. It's the feeling that I can do, be, have whatever it is that I desire within the context that it serves the greater good. And that feels really, really important. It feels really, really important because I've been in situations where externally, the shit has hit the fan and there are other people in my life who are involved, and the experience that they're having, the event has concluded itself. It's over. Justice has been served. But the experience that they're having internally is one where they're filled with resentment, filled with hate, filled with, energy that's corrosive. And for me, that's not justice. That's not liberation.
Yeah.
The liberation is how you now feel. And that's something that we're responsible for as individuals.
And that is a very tough lesson because it means taking radical responsibility. And my observation throughout my life and the various chapters within it is that societally, we are conditioned to blame rather than take responsibility. So that victim consciousness is very, very loud and clear. And to a degree, well, if I'm the victim, I don't have to do that much. I just need to tell you all the things you're doing wrong to me and you deal with it. And what you were speaking to just now reminds me of this beautiful quote from Toni Morrison. So I brought it up. And Toni Morrison says, Ms. Toni Morrison says, the very serious function of racism is distraction. It keeps you from doing your work. It keeps you explaining over and over again. It keeps you explaining over and over again your reason for being. Somebody says you have no language and you spend 20 years proving that you do. Somebody says your head isn't shaped properly. So you have scientists working on the fact that it is. Somebody says you have no art. So you dredge that up. Somebody says you have no kingdoms. So you dredge that up. None of this is necessary. There will always be one more thing.
I mean, that just I've got chills, that sums it up. It sums it up completely. So
Absolutely.
I know, were high achievers, suffered through toxic productivity to prove, myself included, to prove all of those things that you've just mentioned, fighting against the stereotype. And it gets us so far. That's the thing. It gets us so far. But then there comes a point where that operating system is now defunct and we have to upgrade the software. And that upgrade in the software, and again, Bob Marley, emancipate yourself from mental slavery. None but ourselves can free our minds. Radical personal responsibility. And I understand it isn't easy because, yes, we've been programmed, like you say, to blame, to be comfortable being the victim. Chronic victimhood is what we call it. Chronic victimhood. And there comes a point where we're invited by life to show up in a different way, not only for ourselves, but for all children of all species of all time.
Diahann, can we talk about showing up for ourselves and taking the radical responsibility necessary, having the bold boundaries necessary to deal with the fallout? So, what comes to mind? There's so much of your stuff that comes to mind, but two things that come to mind. One, when you talked about the liberation of free birthing your son, trusting your body, listening to your power, and listening to that divine guidance and birthing your son. That's one. And there was something else you shared about your millennial love that has evolved and grown and widened and deepened. And then the pushback you receive from truly owning your dominion, your sovereignty. And the reason I'm asking you about this is because I find that we have a tendency to focus so much on this growth, this emancipation, this liberation, this freedom, this doing what we need to do, but not much talk about the fallout from that and who we need to be to remain in our sovereignty and not default into the programming of making ourselves small, convenient, and all that shit because of how people are reacting to us owning ourselves. We haven't done anything to them. We've just said, I own myself. I own my story. I direct my flow. I co-create with the greater power and I flow in service of that. Tell me about that.
Well, this is the thing, isn't it, that we're most afraid of. This is one of the primary fears that women have when it comes to standing up, being in full expression. It's the fallout. It's the who's going to cancel me. It's the who's going to challenge me. It's the what relationships are going to disintegrate as a result of me speaking my truth. It's the what opportunities am I going to lose if I speak my truth? And those are all real and valid potentials, right? So I'm not the kind of person really that will say to you, none of those things will happen. Don't worry, it'll all work out for the best. Like the reality is, yes, these things may happen. They're likely to happen. What is designed to fall away, create space for you to truly rise into your being will be uncomfortable. And the theory or the kind of concept that we need to embody as an identity is one that says, I can handle it. To be able to handle discomfort requires that you lean into discomfort, requires that you put yourself in experiences where you're uncomfortable, requires that you attune your nervous system to being in that state of discomfort. The problem is that everything becomes hypothetical when we don't put it into practice. So people create fear around these things, which becomes much bigger than the actual experience itself. So on my journey, on my path, what I've had to continually do is to cultivate this identity of brave, cultivate this identity of courage. And the way that I've done that is by taking action. And I know some people are going to say, but what if I'm frozen? What if I can't? I understand. I've been there. I make the smallest action that I possibly can in that situation. And I move and I allow my nerves to expand beyond my zone of comfort to include, a broader range of experience. So there is a big identity piece. You have to decide. I know that word is very triggering for people, but you have to decide that you're the kind of person who, and even if you're not, even if, in the beginning you feel awkward adopting that identity, I can promise you that with time, and this is why, things like exposure therapy, although I don't agree, with it in its entirety, but exposure therapy is essentially like putting yourself in the zone of discomfort and supporting yourself to handle it. So in summary, what I'd say is absolutely expect the fallout. If you can expect the fallout, you're already starting to prime your nervous system. Then it's about the stories that you tell yourself. So the nervous system, once you start thinking, oh my God, this thing could happen, is going to give you all the reasons why this is the worst thing in the world. Then I want to invite you to sit down and to go through all of the fears that you have and to contemplate, if this did happen, what would I do? If I was cancelled on the internet, yes, you feel bad. But what would I actually do? What would my response be? So you're gathering evidence. Then you're going to start to tell a different story. You're going to start to embody the woman who is brave, is liberated. How would she move through this? How would she walk through life? What decisions would she make? How would she respond? You play in that field of what if, of potential. And again, you're priming your nervous system to be able to handle it all. And then you take these micro steps in the direction of, what it is that you're desiring.
And, this is why you work with people like Diahann. This is why you work with people like me, because we're not designed to do this alone. We're the most pro-social creatures on this planet. And so, there are some people who will listen to this and say, okay, cool, I'm noting that down. I'm going to decide who I want to be, and I'm going to work back from there. And those are going to be my steps forward. And there are going to be some people who are like, I don't even know what I want. I don't even know what I need, never mind what I desire. And what I want to say to that is that we take for granted the people we are being now because we're so practiced at it. We've practiced over a lifetime. So we have to remember exactly what you said. It is a practice. We have to take the small steps. We have to get the reps in. Who we believe ourselves to be, our identity is who we believe ourselves to be over and over and over again until we make it fact. So we can create new facts. So Diahann, for the people who live, a lot of the people that listen to my podcast that are interested in my work, that are interested in the work of the people that I have on my podcast and speak to, etc., these people are often, and I too am this person. I've had to do a lot of work. Actually, no, I've been conditioned to be that person. I've had to do a lot of work to get back into my nature of feeling. But a lot of people listening to this, they're going to go straight to, but how do I do it? They try to make it very linear and logical, and they take it out of their body and they go right into the top of their head. and then they're just trying to think their way through. What do you suggest to people who immediately go to, that sounds great, but how do I do it? What are your suggestions, bearing in mind the work you do with the humans you work with?
Practically, when we start overthinking, that's an invitation to get out of the head and into the body. The head is so valuable, the mind is so valuable, but more often than not, we're using our minds and our imagination to create things that we don't want. And so first and foremost, there's an invitation to get into the body. Now, if the most simple thing that I like to do, if I'm finding that I'm getting all heady about a situation, is to come down into my hips, send my energy and my awareness down into my hips, and even just to circle my hips for 30 seconds, a minute. I start to feel my body. I start to feel my feelings. This is where we make decisions. There's a time and a place to be logical, but for most people, decisions are a body-based affair. The best decisions are made from the body. Mm-hmm. Best decisions are made in response to the feelings that we're having. Okay. So immediately when I know that I'm getting, and for me, symptomatically, I might get a headache. And then I know, okay, I need to drop down. Mm-hmm. So the simplest way I do that is send my energy and awareness down into my hips. I circle my hips. I might get up and move. I might marry, if I'm working, for example, I might marry working with movement. So I put some music on and I'm dancing as I'm typing, anything that gets me reconnected somatically to my being.
I want to pause there a moment, and I would like to invite everybody who's listening or watching to track back to times when you have been overthinking, when you've been spiraling, when you've been, catastrophizing. And I want you to see if you can cast your mind back and identify what your tells are. So Diahann shared some real intel there talking about getting a headache. For some people, one of my tells is sinuses or tutting or being very irritable, and that irritability comes through the tutting or the under the breath, oh, for fuck's sake, that sort of thing happens. So I want you to take a moment to see if you can scurry around in your mind, in your memory, to see what your signs are, because that is when you're going to do the things that Diahann is suggesting, the sending your energy into your hips, the listening to music, the moving your body. And if that feels too much, personally, I love this idea of rotating your hips. I know that when I'm doing Kundalini yoga, that is the sort of thing we're invited to do. But if that feels too much, it could literally be feeling the back of your body connected to the chair or whatever you're sitting in. So my invitation is for you to pause this podcast and cast your mind back so you actually have a tangible, practical experience of what Diahann's talking about, because it's not at all theoretical. It is very much embodied, and this is your invitation. Diahann, I hand the mic back over to
100%.
you.
Really well said there. For most women, it's about thawing out. The fear state that most women experience is freeze, as you know. And so what freeze does is it shuts down everything, our capacity to think, our capacity to express ourselves, articulate, to understand sometimes what it is, what the next step is. It completely shuts down our ability to have clarity. And so any way out of the freeze that you might have as personally, as individuals, as part of your practice, is going to help you with that clarity. And I have to also say, when people are stuck on the how, sometimes it's because they don't know themselves enough. So the first step I always say is get to know yourself. Get to know yourself and love yourself. However that looks, it might be going out and exploring what it is that brings you joy, right? Knowing yourself opens the doors of potential for you. And therefore, it becomes less about what is it that I want and more sometimes choice overwhelm. It's like, oh my God, there's so much that I can do and be and experience.
Yeah.
And oh my goodness, like what?
Yeah.
From all this glorious juice that the world, that life, universe, God is blessing me with. And one of those ways, if you're ever feeling stuck, is get a human design or a Gene Keys reading. And while that's not prescribing who you are, it gets to give you ideas about how best you might operate in life, gifts, strengths, challenges, and how you're here to overcome them. And so this thawing out process is probably a lifetime opportunity. It's not necessarily something we do overnight.
Say that one more time, please. Just repeat that.
In the back, this is a journey over a lifetime.
Other people in the back, the front, the left, all over.
Yeah, and the thing is, this doesn't have to be daunting. For me, it's exciting. I decide that this is exciting because I know that it's a roller coaster, because I receive the truth that there will be ups, there will be downs, there will be moments where I really have to surrender, there will be moments where I'm invited to sit in discomfort. Because I accept that, I'm then able to look to the flip side of the coin, the potential, the beauty, the fun, joy, the opportunity, through a different lens. And so that's an invitation for your people here as well. If you knew for a fact that this would be the journey of a lifetime, how is it that you would choose to embark on that journey? With what energy would you want to bring front and center throughout that process? Do you want it to just be about the end result? Because we know the anticlimax effect of getting what it is that you want, arriving at that state and feeling completely, disillusioned,
girl,
right? As opposed to deciding that the journey is going to be the most exciting thing. And so who do I want to be on that journey across all areas of my life, or across just one area of my life, whatever? Like, what is it that I want to bring to the journey?
Yeah. Yeah. All of that. In my head, I've got the power of a woman taking over you. That's what love can do. Power. Everybody listen to Powerful Woman by Eternal. Please do. Taking over you. No, I've forgotten the words. Anyway, let's shift slightly. Something I was on your Instagram taking in and, savoring the juice you share with folks. And something you talked about, I said, yeah, I was talking about that the other day as well. You were talking about overwhelm and burnout and effort. And you were talking about the experience of burnout and how this can make people feel scared of putting in effort because they're really worried about going into overdrive and becoming burnt out again. So I'm going to say something, and then I'm going to hand the mic over to you for you to say whatever is present for you following what I'm saying. Something I know to be true is that when people have been in freeze following burnout, they can become so frightened of burning out again, they don't take the action they need to take. And they say things like, oh, my self-care, oh, my nervous system, I can't burn out again, etc. And then what they end up doing is not physically taking the action they need to take, but the energy of the action they need to take is still within them. So they're overthinking, they're catastrophizing, they're ruminating. It's going round and round and round like a motor that has got nowhere to discharge the energy. So they still end up burnt out. And they don't understand it because they're not taking the action, but the action is just being rinsed and repeated. It's just being recycled over and over and over again. And my understanding now is that when we have that creativity that needs to be shared and we don't share it, that energetic charge that's just recycling round and round and round us makes creativity morph into anxiety. What say you?
I'm just going to receive that for a minute. Yeah. Makes creativity morph into anxiety. Yeah. Definitely. And so I guess the question is, how do we step off that treadmill? And it always begins with awareness, doesn't it? It always begins with being able to turn the gaze towards ourselves and say, hang on a minute, this is what I'm doing. Like, I'm doing this thing where I am rinsing and repeating old patterns in a new way, and I'm getting the same result. Once you have that awareness that you're on the treadmill, you start to begin, or you then have the potential to be able to step off it. The most dangerous place to be is when there's no awareness whatsoever. You don't know what the hell is going on, and you think everything is fine. That's a really hard and difficult place to be in. And if I'm totally honest, that awareness is activated within people in different ways. For me, it was an illness.
Mm-hmm.
For you, it could be a reflection from somebody else. However it is.
Envy is a big tell.
Right, exactly. Yeah. And so there's a tell for you. And then now is the opportunity to move on it. So we have the awareness. We're now able to see what it is. Previously the hand has covered the face like this, and we've just been walking through life like this, a bit further away, and we can see the hand there this whole time. So the next step really is to start to understand why that hand has been there this whole time. And this is where we can also get stuck in, I'm going to say it, we can get stuck in the healing journey. It's like, trying and then never really doing what's required, which is making moves in the direction of this future identity, this woman that we're becoming, that we are quintessentially, but we're incarnating more fully. I say this quite a lot. I feel as though this journey of life is about incarnation. So when we are born, we're not fully incarnated. We are here to fill this spacesuit with ourselves. And so this is where the self-reflection starts to happen with the awareness. It's like, well, where have I been forsaking myself, and why? And what would it look like to not do that anymore? What would it look like to be the liberated woman? And let me start playing in that field. So that's the metaphor of the thawing out. It's the kind of the softening into the truth, the surrendering into being, as opposed to this superficial doing in order to prove an identity that's not even.
There are so many threads, but this is the one. Can you come back to that stuck in the healing piece?
Yeah.
Because there are a lot of people who believe they need to be healed first. And one of the things I say is, not in a toxic productivity raw way, but achieving is profoundly healing. You don't have to be healed to be whole. So could you please speak a bit more to that stuck in that healing, please?
You don't have to be healed to be whole. Say it again. You don't have to be healed.
You do not have to be healed to be whole.
Yes, yes. So this is really important to understand foundationally. So we have moved from the beginning of time, of our existence as human beings on this planet, through various epochs of consciousness. We've moved from matriarchal into patriarchal. We're now moving out of patriarchal into matriarchal. But that transition initially required us to fully embody this femininity, this radical, extreme expression of, femininity, of understanding ourselves, of introspection, because it was so cut off up until that point. So I like to understand how we've evolved and to accept that we've evolved through different phases of consciousness because we've had to. Patriarchy served a purpose at one point. Okay. And the identity of woman within a certain kind of construct, which looked, I guess, in the, if I look in the kind of the 60s, when we emerged into this, full power, bra burning, revolutionizing, rebellious maiden energy. It was very feminine in one extreme, and I think what we're moving into now is this unification of feminine and masculine, the being and the doing. So we had to go on this big healing journey. Yeah. Many of us have had to go on this big healing journey of understanding who we are, understanding our triggers, understanding our wounds. And the reason why it becomes so addictive and obsessive is because for so long, the spotlight was never on us. For so long, the spotlight was on everything else. And we had to, turn our gaze towards the man, towards the children, towards the whatever. And it's like, finally, we get to luxuriate in getting to know ourselves. And then there comes a point where we have to say, okay, it's time to invite in the healthy masculine that also exists inside of us, which is here to take everything that we've learned out into the world and to be an expression. Because what can happen is that we cover everything that we've learned and we know, and it feels kind of cozy, just cycling in healing, and finally, the attention's on me. That's not really what it's about. That's not why we're here. We're here to bring that out and forwards. And so I look at, people who have done a lot of plant medicine journeys, and I understand why, having experienced that myself, that connection to spirit, to divine, to truth, it's so seductive. And yet there's this kind of either or thinking, which says, if I'm not in that space anymore, if I'm not doing plant medicine, I can't experience this bliss, this joy, this ecstasy. And actually you can. And actually my journey, personal experience was, the spirit of the plant saying to me, now take everything. So all of a sudden, it felt like things weren't working anymore in the ceremonies. Like it was just very this, la-di-da. And then I got this message, now take everything that you have learn out into the world. And so, this is the invitation from life. It's not that we just live on an island unto ourselves, and it's about what we cultivate within and then what we give without.
Yeah. I love that so much. And I think to myself, if I waited to be healed, I wouldn't do anything. And what's the fun? It's boring. It's like, it's boring. Like there was a post that you wrote about, I can't remember what it was, but it was like, let's just say sometimes it's mantras and meditations and sometimes it's dropping it low to a wicked bass line. You didn't say that, but and I was like, yeah, like sometimes it is literally, I was having a conversation with somebody and they were talking about ego and this and that and the other. I was like, listen, I'm egotistical. That's it. I'm not going to pretend. I do like the shine. I do like the spotlight. Do I have to keep myself in check sometimes? Yes, but I'm not going to let that stop me from doing stuff. Do I make mistakes? Of course I do. That's all part of it. Do I fess up and say, do you know what? I just reflected. I'm sorry about that. Whatever. Yes, I do. Does it make me a bad person? No, it doesn't. It makes me interesting. It makes me human.
Yeah.
I don't think that if God wanted us to be these sanitized, perfect versions of ourselves, we wouldn't have been created through sex, and the most beautiful flora and fauna wouldn't have come up out of the dirt, right?
Yes. 100%.
And I'm not saying that to say that sex is dirty, but it's very primal and raw, and you know what I'm saying. So if that was the case, I don't know what would have happened, but maybe a woman would put an egg down and a man would come and spray stuff all over it. And then do you know what I'm saying? Like the most beautiful experiences and things we come into contact with on this earth have been born of the raw, gritty, primal, to a degree, putrid stuff that fertilizes it and allows it to be reborn as this tree, this person, this flower, this mountain that we experience in this life.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think what you're speaking to there as well is this idea that we get to integrate it all. Everybody's talking about having it all. Having it all requires being it all. It requires this very unapologetic that you're talking about here, this very unapologetic expression that is messy sometimes, that has its hands in the earth and isn't afraid to like dig around in there and, be weird. You spoke to this earlier, just being yourself, being weird, bringing all of that forward, the messiness, and part of that is the healing. It's the unraveling of this idea of perfection. So yes, I completely agree. And that journey for many women, this journey of healing again becomes another opportunity to be perfect, to become the perfect human.
Yes. And to quote, I have to learn how to say her surname properly, but to quote MP Millie, what's her name, from Kenya, good girls never get the corner office. Be a bad gal instead. Be a bad gal instead. Diahann, you're such a bloody beautiful person. I don't just obviously you're very aesthetically pleasing, but what comes out is even more beautiful than what's on the inside. I could just drink you in.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. That's very kind.
So before I go on a love fest, we have come to the close. So I have 3 questions I ask all guests at the end. So I'm going to put those to you. First one is, what is an actionable step people listening to this podcast can take towards their own liberation and well-being?
The first thing I would say is to identify where and how you don't feel liberated right now in your life. Your relationship or at work or, the lifestyle that you're living. Identify that first and foremost. Then I would say start to tune in to what it would look like to feel, also what it would look like to be liberated and how, most importantly, it would feel to be liberated. Start playing in the energy of liberation. And the minute that voice comes in and says, but I don't know what that would feel, I don't know what that would look like, ask yourself, and if I did, how would that be? And then from there, start to think about a tangible action step that you can make in the direction of that liberation. So if it's in a relationship, for example, and liberation for most women generally comes down to communication. Is there something that needs to be communicated in your relationship, right? And so what's one step towards that you can make and commit to doing it today, tomorrow, whenever you can. Just set a date that you're going to do that. And what you start doing, the more that you lean into doing, the more that you cultivate self-trust. The more self-trust that you cultivate, the easier it starts to get these, bold moves in the direction of your dreams and your vision. So get yourself.
Yum, 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 yum. Okay, 2. How can people contribute to the collective liberation and empowerment of their communities?
Is to share what it is that you discover and explore about who you are, what brings you joy. So if in response to that first question, you discover, that you have, that liberation to you means being able to start a new hobby and doing that, and that brings you joy, then the invitation is to share that joy in some way. The invitation is on a macro level to share what it is that you learn. This is how communities grow and evolve. It's through this sharing of skill, of knowledge, of wisdom, of understanding.
Love that, love that, love that, love that. And notice, Diahann said share your wisdom, your knowledge, your understanding, what you're learning. She didn't say you have to do 12 courses, a master's degree, and become an expert first. Share. Okay, last one. What are some systemic changes you believe are essential for achieving true equity and liberation for all?
This is a really interesting and actually quite a difficult question for me, because I orient towards self-responsibility. So this is really good for me, thank you. And of course, I contemplate what needs to happen. My understanding errs more towards creating new systems than it does fighting the systems that already exist. However, what I'm aware of is that there are people out there working really hard and having success to a degree at influencing old systems. And so I feel that first and foremost, it is about creating new systems. And then if you are one of those people who are working to change an existing system, honestly, my advice is that you become so conscious of your own self-care and your own well-being, and you understand the true nature of what it is that you're trying to do. That you remain empowered to do what it is that you're doing. This is such a good question for me to contemplate, because I think the answer is to create new systems fundamentally, but that's not to diminish the work that people do to change and have done historically to change old systems.
Yeah, I love that. And I really appreciate you taking the time to feel into and respond in a way that is authentic to you, instead of trotting out something that's, sounds good but doesn't mean anything to you. So thank you. I really appreciate that. So wonderful, Diahann. We have come to the end of our conversation. We could have gone in so many more directions. But for people who want to go in the direction of the work you share, do you have anything coming up, and where can people find you?
Thank you, Tamu. It has been delightful having this conversation with you. Thank you. Yes, so starting on Sunday, we have 21 Days of Brave, which is a free coaching audio container that I'm holding for 21 days to help you do exactly what we've been talking about, really. Understand what is stopping you and to move through those blocks, to take micro actions towards whatever goal, dream, vision it is that you have for yourself. Now, this may not, I don't know if it's going to come out before then, but that will go into our membership, our Urban Avatar membership. And you can find me predominantly on Instagram. So that's instagram.com/Diahann Holder.
Awesome. So this episode will be out after your challenge has begun. But as Diahann has just said, it will go into her membership. So I will make sure that there are details about that so that you can check that out. But for now, Diahann, I would like to say thank you very much for your candor, for your time, for your beautiful energy. And I look forward to seeing you on the interwebs somewhere another time.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining me on the Liberated Woman Podcast. Your time and attention is valued. I hope you found today's conversation insightful, inspiring, and even galvanizing. If you enjoyed the episode, please like, rate, review, subscribe, comment, and share. Like many things in our digital experience, the algorithm rules, so your interaction is vital. Your support helps me reach more listeners and attract impactful guests. Tune in for more empowering discussions and practical tips to help you live life on your own terms. Until next time, I'm Tamu Thomas, reminding you to embrace your joy. Podcast produced by me, Tamu Thomas, edited by Biongolia, podcast music by James Anderson.